Mexico's interoceanic corridor creates a path between the Atlantic and the Pacific, challenges the Panama Canal at the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, and drives regional nearshoring. Mexico moves billions of tons of earth, cuts the path between the Atlantic and Pacific to 20 hours, challenges the Panama Canal, and bets on rail, high-powered ports, and living nature to change world trade, nearshoring industries, and test the limits between development, local communities, and sensitive nature along the Isthmus of Tehuantepec under global environmental and geopolitical scrutiny. In 2023, while Lake Gatún forced the Panama Canal to reduce the number of daily crossings and form queues of more than 200 ships, Mexico accelerated an old plan to create a new path between the Atlantic and Pacific without locks, without dependence on freshwater reservoirs, and with direct support from major powers interested in faster and more predictable routes. Starting in 2020, with the advancement of nearshoring, the country saw foreign direct investment grow by more than 40% between 2020 and 2024. In 2023 alone, more than 400 companies from the United States and Europe announced they would leave China to settle in Mexican territory, reinforcing the bet that an interoceanic railway corridor could redraw the logistical board of the Americas. Crisis in the Panama Canal opens dispute for a new path between the Atlantic and Pacific. For more than a century, since 1914, the Panama Canal concentrated nearly 6% of world trade, approximately $270 billion in goods per year, in a strip of water just over 100 meters wide, with about 14,000 ships crossing the isthmus annually. When Lake Gatún reached its lowest level in 60 years, the logic of this system was exposed. The drought associated with El Niño forced the canal to reduce the number of crossings from 36 to just 20 per day, forcing container ships to sail with half their cargo to avoid grounding. In 2023, more than 200 ships were stuck in aquatic traffic jams, while companies calculated the cost of diverting routes to bypass South America, adding about 13,000 kilometers and weeks of travel to each crossing. In this vacuum, the Mexican idea of a competitive land access gained political and economic traction. How the Mexican interoceanic corridor shortens the path between the Atlantic and Pacific. The so-called interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec was designed to function as an iron canal, in the words of former President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, replacing locks with tracks and modernized ports. The goal is to coordinate containers representing about 5% of global trade, equivalent to 200 million tons of cargo per year, with the promise of reducing the crossing to approximately 20 hours. Instead of a ship spending days waiting for a slot in Panama, the cargo is unloaded at a Mexican port on the Pacific, travels across the isthmus by train, and is loaded again on the Atlantic side, or vice versa. Each train carries more than 120 containers, equivalent to a medium-sized ship, crossing jungles and plains at 70 kilometers per hour. When the entire railway is in full operation, internal transport time between the two oceans is expected to drop by more than 80% compared to the original model and maritime queue wait times. Ports of Salina Cruz and Coatzacoalcos redesigned the ocean railway link. To make the new path between the Atlantic and Pacific viable, Mexico started with the sea. In the Pacific, the port of Salina Cruz, a former oil terminal with depths between 10 and 14 meters, underwent massive dredging that removed tens of millions of cubic meters of sediment, deepening the channel to about 23 to 24 meters, a level comparable to the world's largest container terminals. Additionally, a breakwater of approximately 6 kilometers was built, wider and taller, designed to withstand category hurricane winds and waves up to 10 meters in a bay known for severe storms. Hundreds of sensors monitor wind, current, and swell in real time, while more than 2,200 concrete piles reinforce piers prepared to receive automated cranes and post-Panama ships with up to 24,000 TEUs. On the Atlantic side, Coatzacoalcos faced intense siltation, deteriorated piers, and draft restrictions. Dredging raised the access channel's depth to about 12 meters, allowing regular entry of medium and large ships without depending on the tide. A protection wall of approximately 700 meters reduces the impact of waves, and the railway now reaches the pier directly, transferring cargo from the train to the ship without the need for intermediate trucks. The cargo clearance time, which used to take days, has dropped to around 2 to 3 hours according to the presented project. Renovated railway, nearshoring, and industrial poles in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. In the interior of the isthmus, almost the entire historical railway network had to be rebuilt. About 90% of the tracks were replaced with reinforced concrete sleepers, a new layer of basalt ballast, and viaducts in flooded areas or unstable soil. In critical sections, engineers raised the track bed with metal piles and controlled embankments to ensure the stability of heavy freight trains. Alongside the railway, the government structured 10 development poles for well-being, industrial parks with specific vocations in petrochemicals, electronics, logistics, high-tech agriculture, and clean energy. The state offers electricity, water, fiber optics, and digital infrastructure, while companies receive incentive packages with deep exemptions or reductions for 10 to 15 years. Official estimates speak of more than 250,000 direct jobs and more than 500,000 considering the production chain, concentrated in regions where about half the population currently lives below poverty line. This combination of a renovated railway, industrial poles, and reconfigured ports attempts to transform the corridor into a centerpiece of nearshoring. Industries migrating from Asia gain access to a shorter path between the Atlantic and Pacific that is less vulnerable to water shortages, while simultaneously positioning themselves a few hours of truck drive from the U.S. border, the main destination market for this production. Line K, the new axis of the Mexican interoceanic corridor. Behind the discourse of a new path between the Atlantic and Pacific, figures show that the Mexican interoceanic corridor is still fully under construction. Line K of the interoceanic train, an axis that extends the corridor towards the south, currently has about 87.7% physical progress and an official completion forecast for June 2026, according to the Secretary of the Navy. Line K is divided into 3 main sections in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. The section between Ciudad Ixtepec and Tonala is practically ready, about 99.4% complete, and has been in cargo testing since August, adjusting tracks and structure to support heavy compositions. The Tonala to Huistla section is around 79.3% complete and should be finished by July of next year, while the Huistla Ciudad Hidalgo and Line KA to Puerto Chiapas exceed 84% execution, with delivery scheduled for February. In total, 447 kilometers of tracks will be rehabilitated, with 14 stations, 439 bridges, 14 sidings, 626 drainage works, and 3 transfer yards redistributing cargo between the railway and highways. President Claudia Sheinbaum announced the inauguration of the first section of Line K in November and revealed that negotiations are already underway with the Guatemalan government to extend the network to the neighboring country. Suburban train, giant viaducts, and impact on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. While freight trains still await the full completion of Line K, the government is preparing to launch a low-cost suburban service dubbed El Tehuanito. The train is expected to start operating in December of this year, with 2 reduced fare routes aimed at low-income residents of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. One line will connect Ubero to Ixtepec, and the other, Union Hidalgo, to Salina Cruz, covering about 189 kilometers on weekdays and using stations that are already over 80% complete. In heavy engineering, the highlight is the Huistla Viaduct, approximately 4 kilometers and 300 meters long, and near 99% execution, a structure that alone generated about 1,500 direct jobs. Nearby, linear parks in cities like Arriaga and Huistla itself are more than halfway finished, signaling that the Mexican interoceanic corridor is not limited to a freight access, but is redesigning local urbanization with leisure areas, bike paths, and new accesses connected to the railway. Billion-dollar budget and political priority. The Mexican federal budget for 2026 reserves about 105 billion pesos for new trains and 25 billion pesos specifically for the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, consolidating the Mexican interoceanic corridor as a priority government project. In practice, this means more resources to buy rolling stock, complete Line K, reinforce the path between the Atlantic and Pacific, and equip the industrial poles anchoring the nearshoring strategy. Beyond long-haul cargo, already rehabilitated lines like Lines Z and FA currently offer mixed passenger and cargo services. Since late 2023 and mid-2024, they have transported more than 130,000 passengers and almost 900,000 tons of various products, a preview of the potential integration between regional transport and the new land corridor disputing logistical space with the Panama Canal. Ports and land disputes. On the Atlantic side, Coatzacoalcos is consolidating as the gate with works above 97%, while the Maritime and Port Protection Unit building should be ready by mid-2026. In the Pacific, Salina Cruz has practically finished the channel deepening dredging, with more than 87% of works completed. In Dos Bocas, the mineral bulk terminal pier has been delivered, but the east and west breakwaters, designed to protect the bay, are only expected to be ready in 2029. In Puerto Chiapas, the port infrastructure is also nearing the home stretch. Along the path, the government structured 14 development poles for well-being, PODEVIs. 9 have already been granted to the private sector. In the social field, official data records the delivery of more than 4,000 homes and nearly 5,000 subsidies for housing improvements. However, the expansion of the Roberto Ayala Dos Bocas access road requires the acquisition of 1,766 properties by 2027. The section is just over 40% complete, exposing the other side of this new path, where land negotiations and family displacement become as sensitive as any bridge or tunnel work. Nature under pressure. The advancement of the interoceanic project does not come without environmental costs. Recent experience with the Dos Bocas refinery complex illustrates the tension. To build tanks and pipelines, extensive areas of mangroves were removed, weakening natural coastal protection and opening space for accelerated erosion, while flooding linked to the Grijalva River began hitting the region with greater intensity. In the isthmus itself, wind farms built in extreme wind zones multiply like forests of steel. Although they generate renewable energy, the blades, dozens of meters long, spinning at high speeds, have turned part of the sky into a lethal barrier for birds of prey and migratory bats. Outside Mexico, the history of competing megaprojects like the Nicaragua Canal leaves additional lessons. In 2013, Nicaragua launched a 276-kilometer canal with an estimated cost of $50 billion. But the combination of protests and the investors' financial collapse caused the initiative to sink. In the far north, the accelerated melting of the Arctic opens the possibility of the Northwest Passage, shortening routes between Europe and Asia by more than 7,000 kilometers. In this landscape, the Mexican land corridor tries to establish itself as a stable alternative in a world of routes increasingly vulnerable to the climate. Given a Mexico investing heavily to create a new path, do you think this interoceanic railway corridor truly has the power to change the map of world trade? Or is it prone to becoming just another megaproject that falls below expectations? If you liked the video, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends.